America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. This is the November 16, 2021 meeting of the Harbor City Municipal Land Use Board. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of this meeting was provided by posting on the City Hall bulletin board and by notification to our newspapers of record. And I asked Donna to please make this announcement part of the public record. And Donna, if you would, a roll call, please.
Mayor Petty? Here. Mr. Timbers?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
Here.
Mr. Garth?
Here.
Dennis McKenna? Michael McKenna? Mr. Molyneux?
Here.
Mrs. Torres? Here. Mr. Dixon?
Here.
Mr. Hare? Mrs. Johns? Mr. Manos?
Here.
Mr. McGowan?
Here.
And Secretary here.
We have minutes of meeting October 19th for approval.
Make a motion.
Your second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Anyone opposed? Minutes are approved, thank you. New business, hearing on 8 Harbor Lake Park blocks 954, lots 1, 101, 102, 103, to determine and recommend to City Council whether such property constitutes an area in need of redevelopment. So, Leo, if you would preface the meeting why we're here tonight and what we're doing, and we'll introduce.
Sure. So this is the first one we've seen these, but in order to determine whether a certain parcel or parcels of property is considered an area in need of redevelopment, the matter has to come before the planning board for a hearing, and the board's got to determine whether the particular area, in this case we're talking about the Lake Park property, lot 954, lot 1, 1.01, 1.03, is an area needed of redevelopment. In order to do that, there's a number of statutory criteria that the property has to meet, one or more. So it doesn't have to meet all of them, it doesn't have to meet more than one, it just has to meet one. Our determination, our job tonight is to make that determination and recommend back to City Council that they determine that this area is in need of redevelopment, and the process is they would have to adopt a resolution and take the next steps from there. But we properly noticed for the hearing. Jen Heller's here from Palestina's office. She's prepared in conjunction with Mr. Palestina, prepared the redevelopment study, so we can turn it over to her, and then she can make a presentation to the board. I believe the developers here represented by Mr. Davis. So procedurally, Ms. Heller can make the presentation, the board can ask her any questions it has, and then we'll open up to the public. As soon as Mr. Davis wants to say a few words, and then take members of the public one at a time. As you come up, we'll get your name and address, we'll swear you in, say whatever you want. Take it from there.
Okay. Jen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight we are here for the determination of need of an area in need of redevelopment for block 954, lots 1, 1.01, 1.02, and 1.03. So in order to determine that the area is in need of redevelopment and can be designated as an area, it has to meet one of 8 or more criteria. So the 2 criteria that this parcel does meet include the land that is owned by the municipality, the county, a local housing authority, redevelopment agency, or redevelopment entity, or unimproved vacant land that has remained so far for a period of 10 years prior to the adoption of the resolution, and that by reason of its location, remoteness, lack of means of access to developed sections or portions of the municipality, or topography or nature of the soil, it is not likely to be developed through the instrumentality of private capital. This land is owned by the municipality and has remained vacant for greater than 10 years. Given the environmental constraints and the existing deed restriction on the property in the study area, it is not likely to be developed solely through private capital. That is just one of the 8 criteria. The next criteria that this parcel meets is the growing lack or total lack of proper utilization of areas caused by the condition of title, diverse ownership of the real properties, or similar conditions which impede land assemblage or discourage the undertaking of improvements, resulting in the stagnant and unproductive condition of land potentially useful and valuable for contributing to and serving the public health, safety, and welfare, which condition is presumed to be having such a negative social or economic impact or otherwise being detrimental to the safety, health, morals, or welfare of the surrounding area or the community in general. So the study area lacks the proper utilization of areas due to the conditions of title, current deed restrictions, and diverse ownership of the leased parcels in the study area. If you notice, I had pointed out that there's lots 1.01, 1.02, and 1.03. They're not on the tax map. They were created for tax line purposes in the tax records, but there's no lot lines for any of those, so the boundaries are difficult to find. This designation will aid the city in clearing any clouded title and setting forth property boundaries. The boundaries of leased parcels are not defined on the city's tax maps or property records. The limited portion of the study area located within the sewer service area has a negative economic impact on the community and hinders the development of any upland portions of the study area. The extent of the wetlands buffers in the study area also limit the undertaking of any improvements. So this parcel is encumbered by wetlands buffers, and it's platted title. So those are the two criteria, and it is tonight the land use board is to determine whether or not this parcel, through the study, does meet the criteria set forth.
And one thing I obviously forgot to mention, if we do determine and recommend to city council that they be in this area in need of redevelopment, city council adopts a resolution, assuming they agree with us, determining the area to be in redevelopment. And then what that allows city council to do is to enact a redevelopment plan pertaining to that area, setting its own zoning controls. So we have our land use ordinance, and that redevelopment plan would ultimately set forth its own standards for that redevelopment area, which could be less onerous than our zoning ordinance might provide. It would allow certain uses, bulk standards, everything that our zoning ordinance does, it would just apply to that area. So that's one of the purposes of adopting a redevelopment plan.
And some of the benefits of designating an area in need of redevelopment include programs of redevelopment, rehabilitation, and incentives to the expansion and improvement of commercial, industrial, residential, and civic activities. So, for instance, if any of the areas on this map within the study area, the campground, or any other, the recreation facility at the lake, want to undertake any other improvements, the designation of this area in need of redevelopment gives them a little bit more leverage to get through the Pinelands Commission and get through the DEP and get through the TCA. They can get grants, they can apply for stuff. You have more of a bonus with the designation. So are there any questions? Yes.
You mentioned there was a deed restriction. What is the deed restriction?
The deed restriction is from 1850, when the lot was deeded to the city, that the parcel would remain as open space. The intent of that deed restriction was to create a park in the middle of town. And from some of the research, we found that the area around the park was to be developed. And when you see the environmental constraints on the site and the surrounding area, you'll see that there's no way to get the housing around there, to get residents in that area. So this is the entire city, and here's our study area, and this is all wetlands and encumbered by wetlands and wetlands buffers. So in order to get development in this area, you're restricted by the wetlands buffers. And the idea of the park in the center of town is great until the DEP maps their wetlands and you're restricted on development.
So it's a lot blocks that you're speaking of in the park designated area?
Yes,
Okay.
Where are those lots at on that map?
they are all within the red study
I
area.
understand that,
Right.
but where on the red study?
That's the entire study area.
Okay, you just broke it up into pieces then. You took the whole thing and broke it up into pieces.
So the .01s, all that, they were created by the city at some point just to track some facilities there.
Right.
It's the bungalow inn, the restrooms at the pavilion, the log cabin. They just created something so they had a way to track building permits and stuff. There's not separate lots, there's not parcel, it's not a separate property. They're just designations within the city so we can track things essentially.
There are no lot lines. There are no property boundaries for the campground, for example, or the bungalow inn. It's just a line item in the tax records.
So in reference to this, the park area, what area is looking to be developed right now of interest?
To me,
Do we want to transition to the development?
Yeah, the
Prospective
developer
developer?
may be able to answer some of that. This would apply to everything in the red, but
Good evening, Chairman, Mayor, members of the board. My name is Keith Davis, I'm the attorney. I represent Tom Gill and his family who do have an interest in developing a portion of this property. The plans have not been set, and that's not before you this evening. Obviously, that would be the subject of a future, not only review of a redevelopment plan, but also review of a site plan concerning that use. I can represent to you, though, that Mr. Gill and his family are already active in the fishing and tackle business. They have a desire to establish a commercial use on this property that would be open to the public, would have a retail component, but also other recreational amenities along the lake for the public to utilize. So we think it's consistent with the surrounding area and certainly an appropriate land use. But I said earlier, that's not really what's before you this evening. The only task that's before you is to determine whether the study prepared by your planner, Jen Heller, where she went through the statute and determined what the criterion are. She referenced the deed restriction. I think the deed restriction in question actually says to be used as a public place, park. I'm not sure it says open space, but it is a restriction that says that. It is well over 100 years old. We frankly think that the use that we're going to ultimately present to you is consistent, but others may disagree. And to clear up that particular restriction, we believe the most effective way to accomplish that goal and to bring a redevelopment project into this community that we think you'll be proud of is through the redevelopment process. The great thing about redevelopment is that this board and the governing body remain in control of the process. You dictate the terms of development. This is the first step in that process, the designation of the property as a redevelopment area. And if you make that determination tonight, it has to be approved by the governing body. The next step would be to prepare a redevelopment plan, which would dictate what kind of development can take place within the redevelopment area. Your solicitor, Mr. Mattos, indicated bulk standards, but there may be other requirements. They may be mandatory recreational requirements that are associated with a commercial use that would be included in that redevelopment plan, which is an ordinance, a law here in the community that any potential redeveloper would have to adhere to. The city writes those rules, not the redeveloper. So you remain in control, and that redevelopment plan would have to come before you for a master plan consistency. You'd look at that plan, that ordinance, that zoning ordinance, determine whether or not it's consistent with your master plan. If that is approved, even after that we're not done yet, because then a site plan would have to be prepared, consistent with the redevelopment plan. That would be a separate application to this board. You'd review it just like any other site plan. And at every step of the process, the public has the right to be heard, as they should have the right to be heard about any impactful development here in the community. But we think at the end of the day, this is going to be a benefit, not just for the particular property that my client has an interest in developing, but also the surrounding campground. I know our planner is Tim Mickle, who's no stranger here in the city of Egg Harbor, previously served as your professional planner. We've engaged him. He's part of our project team. I know Tim had a meeting with the Pinelands Commission. Pinelands is going to have to review the redevelopment plan ordinance and also the site plan before it can take effect. So I know you were there. Do you want to comment briefly?
Sure.
Because I know there's some impacts and benefits in terms of bringing sewer to help with the existing campground, and that's another benefit associated with this. So Tim, I'll just have you address that briefly.
Yeah, back in 2019, Ryan McGowan and I went to the Planning Commission along with several representatives from Egg Harbor City and Mr. Gill, who's here tonight. And the purpose of the meeting was to find out how they were going to react to a proposal for redevelopment at this particular location. And it's particularly important to recognize, if I can put this plan over here, Leo,
I don't think you need to because it's not a hearing on
It's not
this
an application
development.
development.
If you'd like to, you can. It's pretty honest.
In the past we have, but when the public comes up, we're gonna take the name and address, so just let them speak. Yeah, go ahead, thanks.
The
Donna
Pinelands,
just wants you to speak up.
yeah, the Pinelands Commission is going to want to take a look at the change in management areas as a result of any redevelopment proposal. Right now, the town area of Egg Harbor City extends from 150 feet east off of Philadelphia Avenue and includes, it's almost like a pistol grip around the campground, which is located here. That's all in the town area of Egg Harbor City. The rest of this entire 400-acre site is in a forested area. So it's going to be critically important for Egg Harbor City, through your planner and through the planning board's master plan, to be able to justify changing any part of that forest area to a town area, which would allow for it to be sewered. Sewer is critically important for the development that we're talking about, but it's also critically important for the campground. And the redevelopment designation also will carry a lot of weight when people are reviewing an application for funding. And the city has filed an application for funding a sewer at the campground. And so we feel like that's going to be accelerated and enhanced by this designation as a redevelopment area. So what we will need as part of the effort to redevelop the property is for the Pinelands Commission to actually recognize that a portion of the property would be changed from a forest area to a town area. And that can be a very big deal. But when we met with them in 2019, our objective was to feel them out and see if we could make a proposal that they would feel good about. And we talked about a couple different areas of the city where we could change acre for acre, forest for town. And we were able to convince them that as long as we brought in acre for acre, that was going to be acceptable. So another thing that we did at that meeting was talk about the environmental impacts that this site could have. And the environmental impacts might be with sewer flow, and it could be with traffic, it could be wetlands buffers, threatening endangered species. With traffic impact, Ryan was able to do a by right, which would be the residential development in the forest area and in the town area of that 48-acre tract, and show that the proposed development would actually have less sewer flow and also less traffic flow. So it was an interesting exercise because it got their interest and made them realize that this was a good thing for Egg Harbor City as a distressed community to actually be able to bootstrap itself by utilizing some of this land. Now, it was mentioned that this is a deed restricted area. I believe that that deed restriction, that deed was actually recorded about 1871, so it's 150 years old. If you take a look at Egg Harbor City at that particular point in time, you'll see that the Lake Park is in the center of what was going to be a very developed city coming all the way from Atlantic Avenue to the Mullica River. Now, the development envisioned at that time could be seen in the tax maps of Egg Harbor City. And we all know that if you look at the aerial map of Egg Harbor City, development essentially stops at Moss Mill Road, continues on to the area around Cedar Creek High School, but you're never going to see any intensive development continuing out to the lake. So the reason why I say this is that the envisioned need for that much recreation was based upon a full build-out of the city at that point in time. And that's never going to occur. So the considerations that we're making today would be whether or not there is a condition of title that would be affected, and whether or not there is an undeveloped land that has been unimproved for a specified period of time, which is in fact the case here. So going back to what the Pinelands interests were, we talked with them about wetlands and wetlands buffers, and what they conceded was that as long as you maintain a 300-foot buffer from wetlands, then the only concern that they have with threatened and endangered species would be within the wetlands area, because that's the only type of T&E that is within that tract of land we were talking about. So we cleared the hurdles with regard to wetlands, wetlands buffers, threatened and endangered species, and also cultural resources. We have an agreement as to the type of cultural resources study that would be necessary, but no great concern, having experienced a very intensive review in the area of Cedar Creek.
So the redevelopment designation gives you tools in order to facilitate not just the project that we've been discussing, and I should note Mr. Gill is here tonight, I realized he walked in when I was speaking, but also to bring in the sewer infrastructure. The city would have the ability to issue redevelopment area bonds, low interest bonds, to help provide that infrastructure to deal with an existing issue that pertains to the campground and help address it and clean it up. And that's another benefit that's associated with the action that you're being asked to act upon tonight. So in sum, first step in a very long process where you're on the steering wheel the whole time, controlling what occurs, when it's going to occur, dictating the rules of development, what other requirements a redeveloper has to adhere to, and allowing for those benefits to accrue to facilitate the kind of development and improvements, including sewer, that we think can come to this part of the city. But happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Questions from the board?
I saw something there of eminent domain.
So the reason why that's in here is because of that deed restriction. The city can speak for itself. I don't think there is any desire to take anyone's private property for this project. In fact, the entirety of the redevelopment area, I believe, is owned by the city of Egg Harbor. Okay? So if you were going to condemn it, you're condemning your own property here in the city. There's no private property interests that are going to be acquired other than having that deed restriction we talked about, the park deed restriction, condemned. And that's why we're asking for a condemnation area in need of redevelopment. That's another one of the tools. When you have, as Mr. Mickles said, conditions of title, which impair one's ability to redevelop a parcel, the city can exercise condemnation powers. But with respect to this project, it's going to be limited only to that deed restriction and not taking anyone's private property.
Mr. Davis, absent the deed restriction and with the sewer line being extended, would that open the door for, I know his business is a commercial, but would that open the door for now residential interests? Like developers who want to come in now and they want to make lakefront property?
That's up to you. That's up to City Council, and it would be accomplished through the redevelopment plan. If the redevelopment plan, which is a zoning ordinance that is site-specific to the redevelopment area, specifies that only commercial uses are permitted, then that's the zoning for that tract of land. Only if the city desired to allow for residential uses and designate them as permitted uses with something like what you just described be able to occur.
And just to piggyback on Carl, Tim, you know as well as I do, we've been looking at that area for many years on the other side to try to actually build another lake with lakefront property, because we literally could not do it at our lake. And there's also two 25-acre lots past the lake that could be developed, but basically that's it. Am I speaking correctly?
Yeah, in our past discussions with the Pinelands Commission, whenever you go north of the Egg Harbor City Lake, they don't want to see any more intensive development that is currently permitted, for example, under the Forest Area Development Program. So we talked to them about one point in time about doing some clustered lots here. And clustered lots are permitted within the forest area. You can cluster on 1 acre lots as long as you deed restrict 19 acres in the same district and in the same municipality. So we were talking about doing about 20 lots in here and deed restricting the remainder 19 acres somewhere out here in the forested area. When we talked to them about development over here, it seemed more of an interest to do by right housing, which would be 1 house on 20 acres. And it would be pretty easy for the city to simply look at this area for city-owned parcels and be able to collectively put together tracts of land that would have 20 contiguous acres to meet that criteria.
Tim, wasn't there a problem bringing the sewer across the lake?
Yeah,
When they talked about doing the high school over there and stuff like that?
That is going to be a roadblock. I can tell you that if you have any visions of doing sewer north of the lake, it's going to hit a roadblock and you would meet a lot of resistance. There's also known areas of threatened and endangered species that are west of Philadelphia Avenue, and that would be very sensitive if you talk about redevelopment. So it's important to continue to reassure the Pinelands Commission that you have no desire to run against their environmental restrictions, that in fact you're going to build your plan to comply with that. But redeveloping the parcel, I think, in designating the parcel in need of redevelopment is the first step to accomplishing any of these objectives.
Anyone else on the board?
I would just like to add one thing, that the PAL, Police Activity League now it's called, not Police Athletic League, they're interested in coming to that area at the lake, and obviously they would like to build something there, but they would need sewer too. So that's sort of an incentive to, get that sewer out there along with the campground, which we have a grant identified that we could actually get sewer put out to the campground, which is a big plus. It would really increase the value of the campground, and it would really make it a destination place. I mean, we've all seen the popularity of camping nowadays, and it would really be a plus for the city to have a top-notch campground like everyone desires to have, at least in that I've heard.
So is this for the entire park area that we're taking this on, or is it for a portion of it?
So the designation tonight of the area in need of redevelopment is the entire parcel.
Okay.
Right. Now, a specific redeveloper will come in and just do a portion of it, which at that point we'd have to subdivide, we'd have to clear the title in order to do any kind of subdivision. But this is the first step, this is the entire park area.
Okay.
Yeah. So it includes a campground and other areas that would need sewer, things like that.
Yeah, in order to lift the development restriction, we have to condemn essentially the entire property, and then we can sort of split off and preserve, the vast majority of it after that, taking out the development area.
So all that property would have to be deed cleared in order to take out a portion.
Right, that whole portion is one parcel, and that restriction applies to the entire parcel. So we couldn't subdivide it and then take that portion. Essentially, we have to clear the title for that property, and then we can figure out what we're going to do.
And it also helps with extending the sewer service area and things like that to have.
But Brian, Brian, that's not hard to do because the city owns the whole park
Correct.
anyway, so get the deed restriction on it is
Well, that's
nothing.
that was the description. Essentially, the city needs to condemn its own property. That process will clear the title and remove the restriction.
The issue is that the restriction arose from a grantor in the late 1800s. So that's the restriction that would be condemned. It's not something the city imposed. It's something that was imposed when the city accepted title to this land 150 years ago.
All right, but if 150 years old, somebody said, the committee said that they wanted a deed restriction, it was for a purpose. What was that purpose? It's no longer necessary to have that deed restriction, and Pineland has probably already evaluated the situation and maybe it would go through. But what I want to know is, why do we have to get rid of the deed restriction? What's the purpose of it for this?
Because it requires the lands to be used as a park.
Okay, and it would allow what, that what wouldn't have been allowed before?
Presumably commercial uses.
Yeah.
Which is what Mr. Gill would like to accomplish in this redevelopment area.
On a small portion of this much larger property.
Well, you say a small portion, you're talking about from Rebeg Avenue.
Well, that's, I'm saying
To the
small portion
campground.
relative to the 400 acres to
Right.
the parcel is. That's what I'm saying, on a smaller portion.
Well,
of
anything
this.
north on the 400 acres is going to be, you can't do anything with anyway.
Agreed. Yeah, there's going to be pineland restrictions that are going to restrict any activity there anymore.
So the area gets smaller and his redevelopment gets bigger then in the area that is able to be redeveloped.
If I may, going back to the wetlands buffers, all of this is mapped wetlands. So you're going to take a 300-foot buffer off of all of this.
Right,
This is the upland area, here and here.
right.
So, you know, a large portion here, a large portion here, you can't do anything with no matter what you do.
Right.
But the idea is to clear title and allow some usage on the uplands areas here. Again, working with Pinelands to find something that, you know, works within their rules.
All right, can you just turn on the picture so I can see that?
Let's see.
Okay, that's good, thank you.
Look, I can tell you, as you've heard tonight, it's not an easy process. It's a long one, it's a complicated one, but I can tell you that Mr. Gill is committed to it. He's committed to the city and being a good corporate citizen here to help facilitate what we think is a project you'll be proud of as we get to the end of that process.
So is the intention to create lakes, or do they intend to use the existing lake?
Use the existing. I don't think we have any intention of creating a new lake.
Yeah, there could be, and the purpose will be to create perhaps a 5-acre pond and do aquaculture in there to teach fishing and to teach about ecology. And you can propagate a specific species of fish and be able to teach people how to catch a specific type of fish. So I don't want to get into anything more specific about the species, but that would be the purpose of doing that.
So it would facilitate recreational fishing.
So, again, but that would be a new lake, a new pond?
Yeah, it would be a brand-new lake specific to the property. If it's a 48-acre site, could be perhaps a 5-acre lake, and that lake would have to be at least 5 foot deep, so it wouldn't create lily pads and environmental problems. But that's about the specifications for the lake, and
But again, that's not before you.
Mm-hmm.
We'll refine that concept later, and you're going to see that concept at
Well,
some point.
you say that, but the minute you okay it for redevelopment, you're opening up a door.
Yes.
And I think everybody here and everybody up on the board should know what they're getting into when they vote on this.
Right? And I think they should further know that this designation tonight doesn't give any development approvals to my client. It's subject to a future redevelopment plan and a site plan. That's all.
We understand, we've been through several redevelopment designations, but the more information in front of us, because what you hear on the street is largely inaccurate, and we wanted to ask the source if, you know, because I had heard a rumor that they were thinking about maybe a lake and, fishing and aquaculture, whatever. But nobody's ever said anything until now because we just haven't any. But I understand that we're not here tonight to approve any plans. We're here to determine whether it's an area you need to redevelop. So is there anyone else from the board that would like to speak, ask questions? And we'll open it up to the public if there's anyone that would like to speak one at a time. Identify yourself and Leo will swear you in if necessary.
You can come up, state your,
Nan, you can speak from your seat. I don't think it's necessary to bring them up to the podium.
just state your name and address for the record, please.
It's Nanette Galloway, 349 Buffalo Avenue.
Okay, thank you.
I'm here tonight to speak against this attempt by Tackle Direct to deem Egg Harbor City Park an area in need of redevelopment. I agree that Tackle Direct would be a great business to have in Egg Harbor City, just not in our beloved City Lake Park, where children and visitors have enjoyed open space and recreation for generations. I've seen enough redevelopment plans to know that they can be written to achieve any goal a developer or can put before the city council or the redevelopment in it. I believe the plan prepared by Palestina and Associates is flawed in that it states the land in question has been undeveloped for the last 10 years and therefore is in need of redevelopment. Well, that land makes up a 400-acre City Lake Park, which has been doing what it was deemed to do for the last 165 years, serving as a city park for the residents of Egg Harbor City. Sarah Colwell, in her handwritten deed to the city, decided the land would be the crown jewel of Egg Harbor City, and according to the Bozarth map, is even designed in the shape of a diamond. Carving out 40 acres of commercial establishment would deny future generations open space and recreation and ruin a real smart growth zoning that our city founders created in 1872 as a sacred trust not to be broken. In fact, a previous city council in the early 2000s had city engineer Remington and Vernon prepare a detailed plan to add recreation fields to the southeast portion of the park, which would be more in keeping with what the Colwell's wishes were. If the city ever gets its act together and fulfills some of what the city founders envisioned for the city in the Pines, we will need that land for open space and recreation. My other concerns with putting a warehouse in the middle of Egg Harbor City Lake Park are that the development would require the removal of thousands of trees that would increase truck traffic in a residential area that will soon have a much anticipated bicycle path for our children to get to Cedar Creek High School and the lake safely during the summer months. There are numerous other locations that would be more suitable for a business such as Tackle Direct, including the already disturbed lands across Philadelphia Avenue in the Brother Francis site. Your current master plan even recommends that it be developed in a cluster formation. I remember Tim talking about that and saying that the Pinelands Commission would allow cluster development and even allow a developer to build her own lakes. Other sites to be considered are the Better Built Door site, or the Marine Building on the Whitehorse Pike, decrepit Acme site, and the area south of Rennell Winery Hotel on the Egg Harbor City side of Bremen Avenue. There's also the Industrial and Business Park, which in my opinion meets the criteria that Palestina cited in his report. That area is in need of redevelopment because it has been undeveloped for 10 years. Investors bought up lots and never developed them. Creating redevelopment zone there is really needed to reduce the tax burden for residents. Is that it? I ask that you please vote against accepting this redevelopment plan and do what you have been sworn to do. preserve and protect land interests for all the city's residents now and in the future. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public?
Hi, my name is Ryan Greck. I'm with Pinelands Preservation Alliance. My address is 810 Farragut Avenue in Mays Landing. And I have a statement tonight, but we have also submitted, just so the board knows, Pinelands Preservation Alliance has submitted written comments as well. So the local redevelopment and housing law, as stated in NJSA 40A:12A-2, was meant to address, quote, deterioration in housing, commercial and industrial installations, public services and facilities, and other physical components and supports of community life. In other words, the intent of the law was to address previously developed areas that had fallen into disarray. Cutting a forest around a well-used city park is not what the legislature intended. The page 5 of the determination of need report states, quote, over the years, the courts have ruled that a determination finding an area in need of redevelopment shall be supported by substantial credible evidence. The findings for the determination cannot include net opinions and a mere recitation of the statute, end quote. But a recitation of the statute is all this report includes. Under the statute, at least two several conditions, which were reviewed earlier, need to be met. I'm going to address one of those conditions. My colleague will address the other. But of the two criteria, criteria C is land that is owned by the municipality or unimproved vacant land is unlikely to be developed through private capital by reason of its location, its remoteness, its lack of access, its topography, or the nature of the soil. The parcels here are owned by the municipality. However, its inability to be developed by private capital has not been demonstrated. There are currently some private businesses operating on the site through leases with the town. The land is not vacant. It's a park and there's a campground on site. It is not remote from other developed areas in the town. It's only a couple of miles from the town center and from a developed industrial area. It is accessible by Philadelphia Avenue. And there is nothing abnormal about either the topography or the nature of the soil. There are forested wetlands and uplands, which are both very common in this area, the Pinelands. So in short, none of the conditions under criteria C have been met. In essence, what this designation would do is to have the town take public property through eminent domain from the public and redirect it to private interest through the redevelopment process. But first, the exercise of eminent domain requires that the government be exercising this tool for a valid public purpose. And secondly, there are legal restrictions on the use of eminent domain over an area that has a prior public use. It's not clear what the public purpose will be served by redeveloping this study area, and the study area has been used as a public park for many years. It is problematic because the deed restriction in place intended to preserve the study area as a park, as was stated earlier. The municipality should not be allowed to use the redevelopment process solely to rid itself of a development restriction, where the current use benefits the town's residents. And as was stated earlier, despite an informal and non-binding meeting with the Pinelands Commission, any development would still have to go through the full Pinelands process and be subject to the laws of both the Pinelands Commission and the Department of Environmental Protection with regards to wetlands and threatened and endangered species. And as was stated, it's a designated forest area. This is the second most restrictive area within the Pinelands National Reserve in terms of what development is allowed there. Instead of repurposing a dilapidated, previously developed area, this designation would lead to the clearing of woods and the impacting of a well-used public park that could actually lead to deterioration or elimination of public facilities that currently exist. There are better places to develop than a green space that has always been and was always intended to be a public park. Thank you for the opportunity.
My name is Michael Sheridan. I live at 2326 New York Ave, which is actually behind the lake on the Indian Cabin Creek that feeds the lake. And I just think this is a totally shameful project that's being proposed. This is land that was deeded to be a public park forever, and I pretty much heard 3 reasons for developing this park. One is the campground needs sewer. We don't need Tackle Direct to build sewer. We can do that with grant money. 2, they want to teach people how to fish. We don't need that. I can teach my kids how to fish just fine. And 3, sorry, just had a brain fart on the 3rd one there. But the whole point I'm getting at is this deeded land, it has a lot of history in it. You know, Dr. Charles Smith actually has the Park Hotel Foundation that is up behind the Shaler Mill and Grave that's still there today. You can't, there's no trail that goes to it. There's no historical placard that designates that this was an historic area. But that foundation is still there. That was a hotel where he would bring his guests down from where the Roundhouse Museum is at now up to this hotel where they would enjoy the land. So, oh sorry, now going back to the 3rd thing. The 3rd thing was that they mentioned that it needed to be developed because originally around the diamond was supposed to be all city, right? It was going to be row home streets all the way up in the Mulligan, which is true. But to use that argument to say it was never developed so we don't need this park thing is just frankly ludicrous. We do need this public space. There's not much of it left. The lake is all of that is, you know, still city owned, that is deeded to be a park. My kid, I have 2 young children, and we use those streets all the time. These are our only streets pretty much to use. We go down Nagali, we go behind the lake, we go over behind the campground, and over where the old compost piles are at. Where they want to develop where the old compost piles are at are directly south of the campground. That would destroy the campground. If anything, the campground should be expanded to that area. Can you imagine camping and you have all this white light, you know, just blaring in your face as you're trying to sleep as tractor trailers are coming in and out with their warehouse goods? If you ever stand at that pier, there's a lovely pier there. I go there pretty much every day. It's a fishing pier, right? I sit on that pier and I stargaze both to the north and the south. I couldn't imagine all that white light glaring off of there every single day. In addition, traffic is a major concern. If you go there around 5:15 to 5:30, you will see what I call the car train, which is Viking yachts and all their workers coming back through town. It's usually worse if the bridge is up, because that just backs the cars up and they all come through. So now we're going to be dealing with like shift work of pretty much the same exact thing, where all sorts of cars are going to be coming and going, be pretty much a car train going back through town or to the north. It's just going to be quite disastrous for cars and people trying to navigate that turn without putting a red light in. It's so bad at Viking yachts that they have to bring a cop out there every single day just to let all the cars out. So is Egg Harbor City going to have to do that too? Put a cop there every day just to direct traffic in and out of a warehouse in a deed that should never be, that should be parked forever pretty much. So that's all I'll say on that. I implore you all to vote this down. I don't think we need to redevelop this lake property at all. There are other spots, that was said earlier, and we should be focused on how to enhance the park to bring more people to enjoy the land rather than how to subdivide it out. Thank you.
I'm Dick Colby, 217 Liverpool Avenue. The one point that I haven't heard mentioned is the fact that the city already has an industrial park. It has buildings that are used commercially. It is the perfect place to put any new big commercial development. If they want a place to fish, they could do it inside the building rather than outside the building. Why are you not using the industrial park for the purpose for which it has been produced?
Jane Schollenberger, I'm totally against this park. I agree with everything that everybody else has said. I'm more concerned about the animals, the endangered species. It's kind of hard to believe that you're going to be putting a septic system in and it's not going to affect the animals and the plants that are in that area. It's a very wooded area. There was a gentleman or family that just built a dock there. I'm concerned that that could affect the dock. They could end up changing it or tearing it out. It's a very nice dock. It promotes a lot of family time. The land across the street has been a dumping ground for the city, and it's promoted a lot of endangered plants and animals. And I think it's going to have a horrible effect, again, with the lights and all the traffic. It's going to destroy the area. I don't understand why the city cannot put in their own septic system if they need one at the campground. People of this city pay a lot in taxes, so I don't understand why they can't afford to put a septic in there. I'm against the project, and I also implore you not to pass this. Thank you.
Excuse me, what was your address, just so I have that?
2336 New York Avenue.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public?
Can I ask a question?
Let this gentleman speak first, and then we'll get back to you.
Hi, everybody. Jason Howell, Pinelands Preservation Alliance. I'm the public lands advocate for the Pinelands Preservation Alliance. It's very clear that we all love the city park, and we don't want to see a warehouse on top of it. Now, the developers would like you to think that this is going to be an easy process. This is not going to be an easy process. The entire town is going to be motivated to rise up against this project. There will be lawsuits. There will be challenges at the Pinelands Commission level. It's not going to be easy. But there is an industrial park where these projects are meant to go within the township master plan. And it seems perfectly fitting to direct it there. The redevelopment designation is not appropriate or fitting for this location. And just for some language, the founders of this town said, "Forever public," that this land shall remain forever public. And that's been the case for 150 years. There's no reason to change it now. There's no need to change it now. And we will do everything we can to make sure it doesn't change. Thank you.
I have another question. If this area is considered eminent domain, and the city has to claim it condemned, what will happen to your ability to have authority over what happens to the land if you condemn it? That's the only way you can get rid of the eminent domain. Then, legally, do you have any right to say anything about what they're going to use the land for? And Mr. Gill, nothing personal, is it Gill?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, this gentleman right here on the end. Tim, I'm sorry. Somebody mentioned that you used to work for the city of Egg Harbor?
Yes.
And now you're representing the developer?
Yes.
Well, isn't that conflict of interest?
No. You can't do it at the same time. It's called a revolving door.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to.
There's no legal prohibition.
I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Nan, go ahead.
I wanted to ask a question. What would be the process to remove the deed restriction?
It would be a condemnation proceeding, it would be a complaint in the Superior Court.
What about the Colwell heirs?
That would be part of the condemnation proceeding.
So you have to contact all Colwell heirs?
We'd have to make a diligent inquiry of the original grantors and petition the court to provide notice either to them directly or by another means.
Well, in 2005, there were 4 Colwell heirs. 13 of the 13, said no, we don't want to have anything to do with it, because they removed the deed restriction on the street at the Harbor Plaza. Are you aware of that?
No.
Okay. Well, they removed that. It was a long, involved process, and they had to hire attorneys, and eventually it, I guess, went to court, and the judge ruled that the 4 heirs would be able to give up their rights to the land forever.
Do you have their contact information? I'd love to have it.
No, I don't. That's my question. Is how are you going to get these Colwell heirs who've had children and grandchildren since 2005?
That's not before the board tonight, but
Well, it
there are...
is if you're saying you're going to take it and remove the deed restriction, and that's what's in your report.
The action tonight does not remove the deed restriction. The only thing you're being asked to do tonight is to recommend an area in need of redevelopment back to council. But we have engaged a title searcher who's very good at searching title, locating heirs. We'll do whatever our legal requirements are. And I just want to say, we recognize this is not, Mr. House says, this is a simple process. We recognize it's not a simple process. This is going to be a long process. Any redevelopment process is. But Mr. Gill is here because he believes in Egg Harbor City and he's willing to undertake it. in order to bring this project to fruition. And I would note, everybody's talking about this as being a park, but I think we all know that through the years, there have been commercial uses operating within this park, including the bungalow, including the campground. Those are not areas that are parked, but they've been used for commercial purposes. So we don't think what we're proposing here is inconsistent with how the park has been utilized over the course of the last 150 years.
Is there anyone else from the public wish to speak at this time?
Yes, Mark Miller, 2336 New York Avenue. Are there plans to rebuild the dam or deepen the existing lakes?
We wouldn't have any information on that. This is...
I didn't know if that, they said something about putting in a lake and making it 5 foot deep, so there wouldn't be lily pads.
The existing lake is not 5 feet deep, and it has lily pads.
So I was wondering if that
So,
would affect that.
are they going to maintain the existing lake?
I could
If this
speak
does
on
get
that if you
approved?
would like.
Pardon me?
I could speak a little bit on that. if
Okay.
you'd like. The existing lake is almost 6 foot in the middle. And yes, we are pursuing grants. We just got a $10,000 grant to improve the dam, which is in desperate need of it, no doubt. And right now, we're looking for grants to dredge the lake, okay, because like you mentioned, we don't want to increase taxes by having to pay for those things. We're trying to get grants to do that. And what I'm hearing is that some of this redevelopment, if it is a redevelopment plan, that enables us to get grants to do that. Nobody loves the lake more than I do. I spent the last 15 years on this city council, 9 years being as mayor, improving the lake. How long have you lived in Egg Harbor?
7 years.
Okay, so...
Almost as long as you've served.
No, I've been here for 15 and I've lived here all
Okay.
my life. I've been serving for 15 years. You're here for 7?
And why hasn't the lake and the dam been,
Well, it
why
has-
haven't
it
you
has
applied
been.
for grants
Well,
to
we have.
repair the dam?
We have.
And why haven't the grants been approved?
Because if you know how grants work, sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't. We were fortunate enough through Nanette to get bronze certification through the state of New Jersey, which enabled us to get the grant to do the $10,000 grant to help improve the dam.
And how many times did you apply for a grant in the 15 years you've been serving?
Well, we applied for a grant for the open space.
No, for the dam repair.
For the
How many
and the
times did
dam.
you apply for a grant to get the dam repaired? In the 15 years you've been in office?
I know 2.
2 times in 15 years.
But I don't control that, okay? So you could try to diminish my service, but if I showed you pictures of what the lake looked like 15 years ago, 16 years ago, it's not the same lake that you see today. It was the same lake that I was at when I was a little girl in the 60s, okay, with no bathroom, wings on the side of the stand with dressing rooms that were just crushed. Annette, you can attest to this.
The lake was always fine for me. I just worried about the dam breaking, and that's why.
Yeah, and I'm
The
concerned
Brader-
about that too.
the Brader building was dilapidated, no
Yeah.
roof. Bathroom didn't work, no roof. Okay, it was bad situation, very bad situation. And the docks were unsafe, there were wooden docks that were unsafe. And there's been a lot of improvements made. And, sometime if you'd like to sit down with me, I can certainly do that and show you what it used to look like and how it's been improved since then.
No, I was just concerned how many times you applied for a grant in the 15 years, that's all.
Well, Ryan,
Thank
how many, that you're quite familiar with the dam because we
Yeah,
are under restrictions for that.
I'm aware of at least 4. Typically, recreation tech grants for non-critical use class dams where there's not a huge risk downstream. Generally speaking, if there's $5 million available, they get $100 million in grant applications. So there's way more need in the state where there's funding. So that generally explains why we don't get the grant funding. It's a very, very competitive application process.
I think you've done a great job with the grant work. I've read a lot about, it comes up in the Atlantic City Press sometimes, about the grants that have been applied, but are you saying that if you designate and put commercial property in there, that's going to make attaining grants easier?
No, I don't think it's the commercial property so much, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, so I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a planner.
But the designating the site as an area in need of redevelopment gives you the opportunity to get placed on a state database. That database is linked to funding applications of using public funding. So once you are designated an area of redevelopment, it gives you a bump up in the funding process, so that any property that happens to be within that designated area will have the bump up, even if you don't have a redevelopment plan for that specific parcel. So that's what we're looking for, is that opportunity. Specifically, the campground was included in this request so that it would get that enhanced review while they're considering funding.
And actually,
Just to end that, what I was talking about, that I had some grant writing experience in Philly, and just like you said, you win some, you lose some, but just the fact that you've already gotten grants at the lake should quash that requirement that building there will help with more grants. You can still get grants without enabling this to be a redevelopment project. There's still avenues to get grant money. It doesn't need to be designated the redevelopment area in order to get a grant.
One other thing I could add about the dam, we almost lost the other one several years ago when we had the derecho and the earthquake. We actually almost lost the lake. And we had to do emergency work, we had to do appropriations to fix that. And it was no fault of our own, but that was a big improvement that was made during that.
The auxiliary spillway.
It's an auxiliary spillway.
Is that the original dam that's there?
No, that's the one to the left.
It's been added to?
It
and
was
repaired?
there, but yeah, it was.
It's been repaired?
Where was that spillway added at in the dam?
Well, if you're looking at the dam house from Philadelphia Avenue, it's the one on the left-hand side.
What was added in?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been there, but.
That's been there, but on a smaller scale.
And it was washing out between the dam face and the spillway. So we ended up going in and driving cheap piles, pouring concrete in between to solidify that and stop that leak in that erosion.
Understood.
It's my understanding that they're draining the lake periodically in the winter to kill the bacteria and everything, and I understand that. But if you accept this redevelopment, are they going to be required to do the same thing?
Who was that?
Like if this whole development plan goes through, will they have to drain it? Will they have to empty it? So that the
lake?
Yeah, the lake.
They don't have control over the lake. See, I think there's a misunderstanding.
So they're not going to be controlling, maintaining the lake at all?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
That's no way would we ever do that.
Okay.
No way. Okay. And nor does Tom want it, as far as I know, because it's in need, like you said, of a lot of things that have to be done to it. But we would never take that away from the city, and I would never allow anybody to take it to the city, away from the city. This is just one small area that a Tackle Direct wants to go in and, generate revenue for the taxpayers, having a building there, number one.
Well, Tackle Direct wants to teach children also
but they have
how to fish in that lake.
Not our lake.
No, they're going to make, so they're going to have another lake.
Yeah.
So they are going to build another lake.
Can we get clarification exactly
Yeah.
where is it just south of the campground where the compost pile is at? Is that correct? Or is it somewhere else?
If you're going into the first entrance to the lake, yes, it's south of that, but not, it's south, what? What did you say, southwest?
Yeah, generally.
Southwest.
But what's the acreage southwest of the lake that they're talking about?
48 acres.
48 acres south of the lake.
You can see the campground is here, the lake and the public spaces are here, and we're talking about perhaps an area in here.
So it has nothing to do with the lake or the campground, nothing at all, absolutely nothing.
Well, I think that it would definitely be detrimental to the campground with the light pollution and traffic. I think that would be.
I'm not an engineer. Brian, what would you say to that? I know there's studies that you have to do.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, all of that stuff would have to be addressed in a future site plan.
Well, it's something that should be addressed now, because if people are camping there and you've got trucks coming in the middle of the night doing deliveries, what have you, and you've got lights, and this could turn into an industrial area, which could affect, people wanting to come to the lake.
We're getting far afield here because there is no application for any development right now. This is strictly a decision on whether this area is deemed in need of redevelopment. We're not putting up any buildings or any lights or anything like that. We haven't gotten to that point yet. That would all have to go before the Pinelands, it would have to come before the planning board, it would have to go through a whole lot of other agencies before it's approved. And just speaking for the client and Mr. Mickle, and Mr. Mickle and I have history, having been on the planning board for many years together, and I'm going to tell you right now, and this is just my opinion, there's no better advocate for open space and doing things correctly than Mr. Mickle. But not at the expense of a revenue-producing development that would benefit all the citizens of Egg Harbor, not just the people that utilize the public space. We have done things in Egg Harbor with Mr. Mickle when he was our planner that you would think that you would never get through the Pinelands, but he knows what they want and he gives them what they want, and projects that he has been involved in have been successful. So I don't think that this is going to be any different, but we're not here to build a building today. We're here to declare this area in need of redevelopment or not.
Which would mean that the eminent domain would take place and the whatever it was that was here.
Well, it would give you the ability to exercise eminent domain, but you own the property.
Yes.
So the reason that, as I understand it, is to vacate the deed that deeds it to be open space from 150 years ago, which is not new in town. We've done that along Atlantic Avenue and Philadelphia Avenue from, I don't remember, but where the boat works is,
And the deed restriction would also have to be eliminated.
well, that's
They're sort of one and the same. Just to clarify for everyone, the entity condemning the property would be the city itself. We wouldn't be allowing Mr. Gill or a private company to condemn the city Lake Park and take that over. The city would be condemning its own property to clear title, and then evaluating, do we have areas that are upland, that are developable, that are appropriate for something like Mr. Gill's development. We can't do any of that until we would clear the property of this title, or the title of this property.
And again, at clearing the property, the eminent domain.
The eminent domain would be exercised by the city on its own property.
And the deed restriction would also.
Would be lifted through that process.
All right, this is what they need to understand.
Agreed.
Okay, and once you understand it, that does not mean that it's going to take place tomorrow.
And is condemning the property going to cost the city any money?
No,
Does that cost the city any money in doing that?
No.
This will cost professional fees.
Depends who's paying for it. Yeah, no, I think Mr. Gill has already established an escrow with the town so that there's no taxpayer funds being absorbed through this process.
I mean, taxes go down.
Can I ask a question? So this board has the authority to vote to change the current use of this property, correct?
Yeah, what we're doing tonight.
As a redevelopment, in that aspect, okay? So the question is, if the board has the authority to make this redevelopment, when it goes through the process, does this board then have the authority to set restrictions to the rest of the properties once we lift the deed restriction and everything else? Would this board then have the ability to make restrictions to the other 400 plus acres and only allow for the development of the 48, give or take?
So I believe technically it would be the city's responsibility to execute that, but they would have to get essentially review and consent from the board, input from
Correct. So this board gives, I understand, this board gives input to council, council then takes it and makes it.
Correct. It would be council to take action.
If it gets to the point where a redevelopment plan is adopted by the ordinance on first read in the governing body, it'll come back to us to review and make recommendations. Ultimately, the governing body that doesn't have to listen to anything we say ultimately, but we would see that plan.
Well, they normally respected the board in the past, and I would expect the same.
Yes.
So this board has the ability to give protections to the city and the rest of the land if this was to move forward and not get stopped in Pine Lands or somewhere else.
Yes.
So as long as we have some level of protection to continue to preserve that, you know, that's promising. Thank you.
And that would probably be phase 3, 4. It's not phase 1, which is what we are dealing with tonight, right?
Yeah, that's a.
Yeah, but let me say something. We sit up here and you're telling us that this is a long way off, we're just deciding whether we want to redevelop this area or not. And I'm sorry, I forget your name. What is your name, the lawyer for Mr. Gill?
Davis.
Mr. Davis. Now, you just stood up and said Mr. Gill has money in escrow for this already.
No, to pay for the study. So the study.
So Mr. Gill has money in escrow for part of this project already. Isn't that part of the project?
It's not a development. It's only the study. That's the only reason.
Isn't the study part of the project? If you weren't going to have the project, you wouldn't need a study, right?
I've said it repeatedly. There's nothing.
Well, I didn't hear you repeatedly, so let me hear it again.
It's a long process. This is the first step in it. There's no development that's proposed this evening. It's very customary.
I understand what you're saying. Let me enlighten you for 1 minute. I looked at drawings of this project 2 years ago. So I don't know why we're all sitting up here acting like, you know, nobody knows what's going on.
There are conceptual plans that have been prepared, yes. There's a
Okay.
development.
So there
we're
are
not doing
plans.
this as a academic exercise. This is to get us to a point to hopefully have a project developed, and I will tell you, having annual redevelopment projects throughout the state, it's very customary to avoid the issue of the taxpayers are paying for a private development, which is not looked favorably upon, to have the
Right, and I
redeveloper
understand.
absorb that cost, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's
I
nothing
understand
nefarious
that.
about it.
I
That's all.
understand that.
That's my only point.
But when I got here tonight, okay, we were told that we're just going to talk about whether we want this to be redeveloped or not. And the drawings were already made up. The project, correct me if I'm wrong, the project is between Liebeg Avenue and the Lake Road where you drive into the campsite. And that will be clear cut, and there will be a warehouse in there.
Only if.
With an asphalt driveway and an asphalt parking lot, right up to Philadelphia Avenue.
Not as a result of the action you're going to take tonight, only if
I
council
understand that.
approves a redevelopment to plan to allow that.
I understand that. I understand all that.
And if council puts restrictions on it, then we're going to put restrictions on it. But we're not there yet. So that's going to be a discussion between the redeveloper and the city in terms of what that plan is going to look like.
Right.
We can't get there unless we have a redevelopment.
And now I go back to what I said in the beginning of the meeting, when I said, the minute you vote redeveloping in, you're opening up Pandora's box. And we all know, the minute you get septic, okay, because I live there.
It's not septic, sewer.
Right. The minute you get sewer, right, I stand correct. Now all of a sudden the whole game changes. Sewer changes the whole game. I live there. I grew up on the White Rancher that's right next to it.
Well, look, you say Pandora's box, we say you're opening up a door for opportunities for the city of Egg Harbor.
I get it.
Everyone is entitled to their opinion.
Right.
We're here saying we have a commitment to Egg Harbor City. Either the board's going to agree with it or you're not.
I have nothing against Tackle Direct. I am familiar with it. It's a great company. I get it. Okay? But everybody should know what the facts are so far.
I don't think we hid anything from the public tonight. I think we've been very clear that we are proposing a commercial development on this property ultimately, and we'd like to do so through the redevelopment process. Okay? We don't have hard engineered plans yet. We don't. There's concepts. And of course, I think you would expect someone who's going to make an investment in the city to at least think about what he may want to establish on the property in question, and he's done that, and maybe you've been privy to review those plans. It's proposed to be a retail warehousing use, incorporating recreational amenities.
And before that, it was going to be soccer fields and baseball fields and football fields. Thank God we didn't do that, because we ran out of kids to play the sports. So we're not even using the fields that we're using now. But the only thing I'm trying to get across to everybody is, be careful what you wish for. Because somebody's idea of redevelopment might be $1 million houses on the lake. And somebody else's idea of redevelopment is an online tackle store that's a huge warehouse, a steel building.
And what I would say to you is your safety valve to avoid that concern that you have is step 2 in the process, which is a redevelopment plan, which can only happen by adoption of an ordinance by city council, which this board will have the opportunity to review. You control the zoning in your community. You control what that redevelopment plan says. If you say you want $1 million houses there on specified bulk standards, you can do that through a redevelopment plan. If you don't want it, then you don't put it in there. If you do want a commercial building, but you want it to adhere to certain architectural design standards, so it fits in with the community, you can do that with a redevelopment plan. If there's certain open space set-aside requirements, you can do that through a redevelopment plan. But that plan's not before you tonight.
Right. I know that, so you know that, and I want everybody else to know that.
And you write that plan.
Well, you say I write that plan. I don't write that plan. This board can be overrun by council at any time.
It can through a reasons resolution, but as Mr. Garth said, I think the history has been...
It's been done before.
That council respects this board's...
It's been done before.
Maybe it hasn't. I only know about this project.
And I want everybody else to know about this project.
I have something to say. Mr. Worker, thank you for being so honest and bringing that to our attention. Step 1 is where you need to stop. Very well said. Step 1 is where you need before it opens Pandora's box. Now, this warehouse that you supposedly had seen, every member of the council has seen.
I don't know if
plans.
every member of the council seen it or not. I didn't say that.
There was
I said I saw it, and
okay, well,
I have a dog in the race because I grew up there.
All right, well, Mr. Davis said there's a warehouse. How many trees are they taking down for the warehouse? Has anybody done any studies as to if there's anything endangered back there? Animals, plants, trees? How big is this warehouse?
Look, we've stated repeatedly, we're in the Pinelands area. It is the most heavily regulated environmental agency in the nation next to the California Coastal Commission and the Cape Cod Commission. They are going to pay very careful attention to the existence of any endangered species in this area, and we have to adhere to it. We don't have a choice. We have to adhere to all those regulations, and we will do so. And by the action we're asking you to take tonight, you're not skirting those rules and regulations because you can't.
And I understand that.
Looks like
I just want everybody else to know, when the board votes, if you vote for redevelopment, you're going to get redevelopment. I live in a community right now that has a high school put in it. And all my neighbors came to me and complained because they didn't know all the roads were going in. They knew the school was going in, but then when they pushed the roads through, they found out how small their properties are. So one by one, they came walking down the avenue that was plowed through to tell me all their problems and to tell me how, I didn't know the road was going to be this close to my house. Why is the road this close to my house? When you vote redevelopment, be careful what you vote for.
Well said.
That's all I'm
Well
saying. Know what you're getting into.
Can I make one statement to process as well? Your question is a valid point, T&E studies, cultural resource studies, all of those things. Those are all things that will be undertaken by the applicant if this was approved. There's no reason for them to go and expend all of the money to complete those studies and then come back with that information and then, get shot down here and it's a non-starter. Just from a process standpoint, it would be come here to seek some approvals, go and do that work. If there are cultural resources that are identified that prohibit development in certain areas, then those would be carved out and no development will be allowed there. Those are typically farther down in the process, not just for this site, for any site. Those are the next step in the process. You sort of get through this preliminary phase, make sure that it's something that you're going to be able to move forward with, and then you start to sort out those kinds of details. So none of that would, all of that would be conducted, but just That generally, as this process works, will be after this step.
I have no idea that the plans were already somewhat drawn up. It seems, that again, it saved this company some more money by denying this tonight, because it seems like usually how this would go is the town first comes forward and says, hey, let's redevelop this land, and then they seek commercial entities to submit their plans. Instead, I'm hearing that these plans were drawn up first, knowing this was city property, and now this meeting almost feels forced to start this process. Why is this meeting even happening? How did this meeting come about?
Yeah, I have two things I'd like to know. Todd, you said you saw plans?
I saw drawings.
Drawings. Well,
I saw drawings of an idea.
I went to City Hall and asked to see them, and I was told, they don't exist, we don't have anything here.
Well, I don't know.
And then I was told, well, there's something in the file, but it says it's confidential. All right,
Well,
so,
I guess I let the cat out of the bag. I don't know.
well, you know,
but-
the thing is with these redevelopment things, this is where they start. In a conference room with three or four members of the city council. And that's called the redevelopment committee. So anytime somebody calls the city and says, I have a project I'd like to do in your town, they meet with the redevelopment committee, when the actual redevelopment committee is the entire city council, okay? They'll meet in the back room, they'll discuss it, and then they start this process. All right, well, you're gonna need to make it a redevelopment zone. So you gotta go to the planning board, and he pays for the study, he wants the land, he wants it, and he paid for that study. And he's gonna pay for the next study, and he's gonna pay for all the studies.
I know, man, I
So, it's
know.
like, the redevelopment committee that meets in the back room has already agreed to sell him the land, or give him the land, or whatever they're gonna do. They've all probably already talked about giving him a tax incentive to do it.
Well, I don't know anything
And my problem
about that.
with these redevelopment programs is that they're all done in the back room, and the public knows nothing about it until it's too late. And we've had numerous redevelopment zones in the city, and none of them worked out. We even got mired in a 15-year legal suit with one developer because the city council, redevelopment committee, never financially qualified that individual. And we were stuck with that 15 years not doing anything in that zone. It's got to stop. It's got to stop. If somebody wants to come in here and develop something, fork over the money, buy the land, and do it. Instead of all this redevelopment stuff. It takes all the power away from the people.
To be fair, that's not
And-
possible at this point. That's,
Well,
Yeah,
no,
would
because
it
it's
be
deed
more-
restricted for open space and recreation.
that's,
It should stay that way forever.
yeah, I'm not saying in
There's-
favor or not, I'm just saying.
And that was the second question that I had. Why that spot?
That's what I was wondering, would it be?
Why does it have to be
more
that spot?
cost effective to do it someplace else?
Because the city owns
Away
it.
from the wetlands
We
and
own a lot of
ponds?
land. Edgewater City owns a lot of land. All of it's deed restricted. Everywhere in the city is deed restricted from the Colwell deed. You can only do what that deed says you can do.
It's been,
Marketplaces.
the deed has been set aside numerous places through town to encourage development.
Once. It was only done once. The
I
deed
believe there was a
restricted-
couple properties along Atlantic Avenue and the Pike there, because that strip between Atlantic Avenue and Route 30 from the city limit to the city limit was all dedicated for open space. And the projects,
Where the shopping centers are and stuff?
yes.
Well, I don't know.
That
I think the only
that block, and then
marketplace,
one of the last ones that was done was
Security's place.
was the old Egg Harbor boat. There was still a deed restriction on that, and I don't know how many years ago that had been, but that deed was part of that. I remember this was very early in my council career. It's probably been 15, 20 years ago, and they lifted the deed because I had the same question about, they deed restricted this 100 years ago. Who are we to change it? But you have to make up your mind. Do you want the town to grow, to bring ratables in, or do you want to sit on your hands and, watch the world go by? That's a choice, that's an opinion, and it's just my opinion. And even though I didn't like it, we did it anyhow because it facilitated growth and brought, jobs, businesses or whatever to the town. So I view this as the same kind of a thing, and these are the ways that things are done today. And this is nothing new, that a developer comes in and the city finds some way to make it attractive for both parties to benefit from, using whatever leverage that they can. Is it right or wrong? Everybody's got a different opinion.
Well, it would be fine if it actually developed into something, but they never do. The only redevelopment project that turned into anything is Egg Harbor North, and that's been kind of put on the squash.
Well, how about
The Wawa
Wittenberg Manor?
redevelopment plan.
That turned a non-revenue producing property into...
But that wasn't even necessary. It was only done before the developer. You could have still built that building there. It was a school, and it was turned over to the city. The city could have pulled in a developer and said, we want you to develop this property. But the way they went about it was the redevelopment zone situation.
Sure, but there was, and I know we're getting
To give the
far afield here, but
developer an incentive.
how about
Like money.
hundreds of thousands of dollars in landscape that they did at their expense that the city benefited from, didn't have anything to do with their development?
For $60,000 a
Can
year
I
in
just say
taxes.
one thing? The reason for the redevelopment plan is so the city, we're all forgetting this, I guess we all have amnesia here, but the reason for the redevelopment plan is so the city retains control over the project.
Yeah, but you're just giving,
If you sell the land, if you sell the
just
land,
giving
they
it
can
away.
do whatever they want.
You're just giving away all the future
Let's
recreation of
just
every
stick
kid
to
that was
what
ever
the topic
born
was
or
that
lived in this
you were
town.
talking about redevelopment plans and why they're done. They're done for the city to retain control, that's all, of the whole project, because just like the Wittenberg Manor, Jack, you were here when we did that. We went out to bid, we had 3 people, we pretty much said what we wanted, and that's what we got. And we got a very good project out of it. The Wawa is a redevelopment area.
It's just sitting there, follow.
Okay, because
Yeah,
it was just handed over to Wawa 3 weeks ago. There's manpower shortages, they can't find carpenters. I tried to put them in touch with the
My
union to get
cousin built
PLAs.
Wawas. There's plenty of people willing to work.
They're also waiting for a letter to be.
Okay, we're getting...
Well, nobody's against redevelopment and growth, but we're looking at different, what about the industrial park? Why not develop there? Or any other areas in the city? Why take protected or pine lands and take all the trees down? And the wetlands
Well,
are going to be
actually, in the
affected.
industrial zone, there really aren't any more lots open. We just had that meeting a couple weeks ago, and at one point in time, Jack, I think when you were still on council, we were trying to get more property to designate as an industrial park because there's no more room to build. There are people who have acquired these lots and don't build on them.
That's why you need a redevelopment zone to make them build on it, or to take it away from them by
Yes.
eminent
Development
domain.
plan, and
Yes.
there you go, I know, you're absolutely right. That's what I was trying to tell you
You need a
before,
job?
when you were
There
poo-pooing
you
the
go.
redevelopment plan.
Okay. Is there anyone else from the public wishes to speak?
I wasn't going to speak, but I will just say here, I was on council for 9 years.
Identify yourself for the...
436 Hamburg Avenue.
Thank you.
I remember when this project came when I was on council some years ago. I remember a lot of this conversation. We welcome you, sir, here. We would love your business to come here. We just don't want you devastating this park area. We have so many places. To me, it would be so much more beneficial to have you on Route 30 or some of those areas where there's property that I'm sure you could acquire that just sits there in its devastation. And it would improve the whole town, the look of the town. People coming down the White Horse Pike, what do they see but destruction, devastation, horrible trash? If you could get a place like that, we would welcome you with open arms. I would anyway.
Yes, agree. Yep.
Anyone else from the public? And I'm going to close the public portion. Anyone from council or the board, any questions or comments? Leo, would you frame the resolution?
Yeah, and just as a reminder, I think the chairman summed it up a little while ago, but, again, we're not removing any deed restrictions tonight, we're not approving we're not voting on any uses that are going to be allowed. We're not approving any site plans, any variances, any applications for development. We're not approving any new lakes or anything like that. Our job tonight is to make a determination and a recommendation to the governing body whether this Lake Park property is an area in redevelopment because it meets one or more of the factors in the redevelopment law that Ms. Heller outlined. She identified two. It's our job to make that determination and recommendation to City Council. Ultimately, it's going to be the City Council's decision, but the law requires us to hold this hearing, which we're holding tonight, and make that determination and recommendation. I presented a resolution and distributed to everyone, Resolution 5 of 2021. It is an affirmative finding in the form of a resolution that this area is an area in need of redevelopment, and that's the form that we should do. So by adopting this resolution, it's an affirmative finding that it is an area of redevelopment. Obviously, if the resolution doesn't pass, it's a determination that it's not. So what we should do is move the resolution, have a second, and then we should probably do a roll call vote.
Is there a motion then determining this area is in need of redevelopment? Someone offer a motion? Motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, Ron.
Mayor Chimpati?
Yes.
Mr. Timbers?
No.
Mr. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
No.
Mr. Garth?
Yes.
Mr. Molyneux?
No.
Mrs. Torres?
Yes.
Mr. Dixon?
No.
Mr. Hare?
Yes.
Nine, right? Five yes, 4 no? So that means it passes. That's an affirmative, recommendation to City Council that they declare this property as needing redevelopment. We'll, Jackie can sign the resolution, and I'll help you check off the boxes, and we'll send it over to the governing body.
Thank you very much for your time. Old business? Public comments? Ryan, do you have something? Sorry. We'll hold over questions and comments from the board. We need to go into an executive session. What's the proper procedure for this?
All right, so we're going to go into executive session now. There's a little statement you have to read by law. At this time, the Hayward City Land Use Board will be entering into an executive session out of the general public in accordance with the provisions of the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act. The matters to be discussed are potential future litigation involving the application we heard last month regarding the Shiva and potential attorney-client matters. These matters may be discussed in executive session pursuant to the exception of the Open Public Meetings Act as a matter dealing with potential future litigation and attorney-client privilege matters. The Land Use Board will keep minutes of the executive session as required by law, which will be approved by the board and made promptly available for public inspection when required and permitted by law. So we're going to do that through Resolution 6 that I circulated. So we can do a motion, a second, and all in favor, and we'll take the next step.
Is there a motion to go into executive session? Motion. Second?
I just have one quick question. Carl and I can...
Yeah, what I was going to say, as members of the board, when we go into executive session, I would, at a very minimum, ask that you two not participate, and then if we have to come back on the public session when we're done, we make any type of affirmative vote on anything, I would ask you not to participate in that. Your members of the board, like, if you want to stay, you can certainly stay. If you want to leave, you can leave. So, because we're not going to do anything else after this. And then, Donna, that.
Yeah, sure. Who's second?
Gladys did.
Yeah.
I made the motions.
I second it.
I know you're gonna go too.
Anybody need a break?
You guys have a great.
They're gonna have to watch the video.
I hope I didn't lose anything.
Be back.
What, did it started all the way from zero again?
Recording started, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't pause, it stops and makes it.
All right, so we're now, the land use board's now out of executive session, we're back into a public session. We went into executive session, we discussed that potential future litigation involving the yeshiva application that we heard at last month's land use board meeting and another attorney-client privilege matter. We didn't take any formal official action. Now we're back on public. Seems like there was a majority, at least, that would like to reconsider the yeshiva application. So what we would need now is a motion and a second that we're going to formally reconsider the yeshiva application.
Is there a motion? Motion, second?
Second.
Motion and second, do we want to?
All in favor?
All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion's carried, thank you.
Okay, so we'll check with Mr. McKenna as to his availability. We'll shoot for the 21st if he's available. If not, we'll use the 14th as a fallback date. I appreciate it. Long nights. I appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Members of the board, any further business? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Ryan, them brakes are still loose.
Motion for John to get some food.
How's that? I know Ryan ate his dinner tonight.
I did pass that along.
Yeah, in a car.
I saw it.
That's the first thing I do at night.